upon us today of inviting him quickly as we begin today's discussion. So today we have with us Mr. Alex Goma. He's the Managing Director, CEO of Grand Series Limited, a UAC company. Mr. Alex Goma is an experienced business leader with over 20 years experience building people, customers, and brands, starting his career from Procter & Gamble to British American Tobacco to Guinness, PZ Cousins, and now Grand Cereals. He's been across a number of multinationals and he's been around across Africa. Prior to his current role, he has held various roles such as Managing Director, PZ Cousins Customer SBU, Strategy and External Affairs Director, PZ Cousins Nigeria, Sales Director for Guinness Nigeria, Head of Trade Marketing and Distribution for British American Tobacco. He has been BAT Country Manager for Senegal, Gambia, and Mauritania, District Manager for P&G Ghana, North and West Nigeria, Customer Marketing Manager, P&G Nigeria, and Fabric Care and Customer Marketing Manager for P&G Egypt. He holds a degree in biochemistry from the University of Port Harcourt and an LLB degree from the University of London International Programs. Is a fellow of the National Institute of Marketing of Nigeria. He's a member of the advisory board of edisco.com, advisory board of Afrisans Digital, non-executive director of Litramed Publications, publishers of Latin books. He speaks in a lot of public fora with a focus on leadership, personal development, business strategy, sales, and marketing strategy and execution. I think today we are hitting exactly one of his core interest areas by having this discussion on leadership. So I present to you today Mr. Alex Goma to talk to us about leadership, a topic that he finds particularly interesting and exciting, and something he's excited to speak about. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Diolu.
Yes,
I'll be trying to share a screen with...
You are enabled to share.
Okay, so let me see if it goes.
Excellent. Yep.
Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can. Growing leadership. Leaders.
Yes. Just a moment, let me see. Yeah. So I think, thank you very much for the opportunity to share once again. And I think leadership is something that is critical for every one of us, critical for us as business people, critical for us either in our homes or roles or whatever we do. And that's why it's something of interest to me. I think it's leaders that make things happen. So it's not about titles or roles, it's about how you make things happen. There are a couple of things I'm going to share. So I just have a few slides to guide, I think is some basic principles and guidelines. And I know we're in a series of topics around leadership. So today will be focused more around envisioning because that's the first part. And then we have another session, I think on the 6th of July, where we'll talk about how you enlist and engage people. So basically what I'll try to do is really what's leadership? What are the things I call the leadership 4Es? What are the elements of leadership that we've got to focus on, and then hone in a bit on envisioning and then try to summarize and we can take questions. I'll give the general principles. I'll try to bring a few examples from my experience and probably leave room for questions as well so that we can take from there. I'll leave some facts out because some of these experiences are tied to companies or organizations I've been in. So as much as possible, we'll try to manage that. But what exactly is leadership? And I think for me, in all the learnings, teachings, and everything I've found, this definition by Stephen Covey is probably the best for me because I think it amplifies what really it's all about. What it simply says, leadership is about getting results in a manner that inspires trust, right? So it's not about your role, it's not about your title, it's about how you deliver results in a sustainable manner, getting results in a way that inspires trust. There are a couple of keywords that we've got to think about when we look at that. And I think one is inspiration, which means that you're having an impact on other people. Therefore, the results that you deliver actually encourages or engages or drives people to do better things. And the second thing is about trust. Trust has two components. It's basically competence and character. So if I was to simplify this statement further, leadership is getting results in a manner that inspires competence and character, right? So the role of leadership in any organization, in whatever role you are, is about how you create the right vision for the organization or the team or your family that you're trying to. How do you provide the right environment for that to thrive, and therefore how do you create the right motivation to get people to move and deliver what you want them to do? And most of all, how do you execute? Because it's about getting things done. So leadership is not just theory, it's not just strategy, nice buzzwords. It's about making things happen. I think Nike typifies it, just do it, right? But I think to really get it to happen, or for people to understand, it's not the focus of just doing it. There's a lot of work that happens before you get to the stage of just doing it. And I think that's what we are looking at here. And if we break down these elements, if we break down role of leadership into what the elements are, it's really about how do you create a picture, right, of where you want to get people to or what it looks like. It's about creating the right vision, providing the right environment, and driving the execution of the kind of actions that you've agreed. So what I call the 4 E's are envisioning, enlisting, and engaging, and also executing. These are the elements of leadership. So anyone interested in leadership has to understand what this is all about, and therefore how can you drive these elements? It's all these 4 elements working together that makes somebody a very strong and capable leader. There are people who demonstrate the fact that yes, they can have dreams, they can see what the future is like, but if you can't get other people to buy into that and move towards that, then it's useless. And if you get people to engage, but you cannot ensure that they deliver, it is useless. So we have sayings where they say, oh, this person is a good person, but he couldn't get people to do it. The president is a good man, but you know what, he doesn't have the people around him to do what he wants to do. No, you carry the burden of responsibility to take everything from the creation of the vision to ensuring that it happens. It doesn't mean you're the one going to execute all the tasks, but you have the responsibility of going to drive that. And today's session will be focused more on envisioning, because that's really where it starts. It's where you start to create the picture of what is possible and what people need to look at or what people understand. So it's really about painting a picture of what the future is like, and it should answer the questions. Where are we going, and what does it look like if we get there? So one of the challenges I have with our country today, and I ask anyone, so whoever, the apologists of the president or any other governor or any leader or wherever, the simple question I ask is, how many people know the picture of the kind of Nigeria we're supposed to have? If it's not clear, you cannot ask people to make sacrifices. You cannot ask people to follow you on a journey where they're not clear what that picture looks like. So we don't have a very clear, defined picture of what Nigeria of the future is. You know, once upon a time, it was Vision 2020, and we would have everything in the pipeline. Unfortunately, the guys thought that 2020 was very far away. This is the year 2020. And instead of all the things that were promised, we actually ended up with Corona, right? So it's a picture of where we want to go. What does it look like? Very clear. So the question I ask people is, for your team, what is the concept you are trying to sell to them or your organization? What are you trying to build? If you focus on just the task or the list of things you're trying to do, you might get some traction. So some of us start businesses because we're trying to survive, all right? However, trying to survive alone is not going to help you build a business that is sustainable, right? A business that will grow beyond just survival, right? You've got to think about how big could this possibly be? Because that's how you start to set the foundation, right, for the kind of business that you use. So the simplest analogy for me is like building a house. If you want to build a 100-story building, your foundation has to go deep, but you must have conceptualized the building before you start putting your foundation. Because if you start by just working on the foundation, after 2 years, when you find out that, oh, I can actually go 5 stories more, you have to dig everything all over again, and therefore start to drive this and move this and rebuild everything. So it's critical to get people to understand where you're trying to get them to go and what it means for them. I was trying to tell Diolu that, okay, I will steal one quote from the scripture, even though I'm not a pastor, but there's a simple thing. Where there's no vision, the people perish. Mm. If anyone is trying to build anything, what exactly are you trying to build? People will follow you when there's clarity of purpose and vision. It is also stronger when the vision and yours are congruent. And that's why the second quote I have there by Mark Twain is critical. It's most important, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. So for people who find out why they exist, they just don't do stuff because you pay them a salary. They actually have a higher purpose. And if you go back and look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once you start to solve the basic problems of life, people start to look for actualization. And people that you lead in your organization, if who they are trying to be versus what your organization is trying to be, there's no congruency, you will not be able to get people to buy into following you, even if you have good things. So that's why sometimes you'll find people leave organizations where the perks are fantastic, the salary is fantastic, and yet they'll go somewhere because actually there's a stage you get beyond where salary doesn't mean anything to you anymore. Because you know the capacity that you have in you that you can earn a lot more than that. So for you to lead people like that, you've got to be able to show them a picture of where they're going to and what it means for everyone. So the question to ask sometimes is, do you lead from tasks or do you lead from short-term results or do you have a big picture perspective? Are your actions today driven by survival, especially now where we're facing this corona epidemic and it feels like the world is going to fall apart and everything is falling apart? Are you leading your organization from the fact that we have this pandemic that is something frightening, or are you actually looking at the pandemic as a temporary aberration and therefore we've got to deal with it, but actually we've got to stay focused on what we are trying to achieve, right? I'll give a simple example. I've just been in my role now since October. And when I came in, one of the first things I did was to look at the history of the company. Okay, we've grown, we've built a business that is in the early 40 billions in 36 years. And I put a crazy objective to say, okay, we want to triple that to 120 in the next 10 years. Now, it doesn't seem like it's achievable. It doesn't seem like it makes any logical sense because over 40 in 36 years, and now you say you want to add 80 in 10 years. Does it make, but the reason is, how do you get people to find what can we possibly do? And the past 6 months have been tough. We're struggling to make a profit. We're struggling to grow above last year. So how do I start to get people to understand that, yes, we're going to survive and go through this, but what will actually get us out of this to actually draw and pull out their creative juices and their energies, not to focus on the challenges that we face today, is to use those as a springboard for us to say, actually, this is where we're going. So whilst we're taking short-term decisions for survival, we're not losing sight of what we're doing, and we're actually putting the building blocks of what is going to be required to help us build that business that is triple the size of what we have in the next 10 years. And I've got to be able to paint it in a manner that is clear and what it means for them and their families, and therefore how they will turn out to be. What's the kind of person they have to become? What kind of organization, what kind of climate, what kind of environment will we have to have for them to be able to do this and for that to happen? So it's critical to do that. And then you can start to find people, right, who find out that this actually appeals to me. And this is why people will stay extra hours or go the extra mile, right? Irrespective of the fact that, okay, things are tough right now, or maybe they don't have the best of pegs or they don't have the best of resources to work. They actually understand and know that, okay, this picture that we're trying to get and this kind of dream we're trying to build is something that is interesting, is strong enough to engage me, and therefore is something I want to apply myself and put energy for. Now, for you to do that, it means that you yourself have to be clear about what you're trying to say or where you're taking people. And actually, leadership starts from your thoughts. The picture of what is possible comes from your mind. Again, another piece of scripture, be careful what you think because your thoughts run your life. I think in another verse in Proverbs, it says, as a man thinketh, so you are. It's the same thing that was said by Henry Ford when he said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. You cannot give what you don't have. So really for you, if you want to expand and develop your leadership, there are a couple of questions you've got to ask yourself. What is at the core of your beliefs? Do you lead from a position of limitations or from a position of what is possible? You cannot create a big vision from a limited mindset. If you look across at all the examples of people who have led various organizations, these people do not have a scarcity mindset. They have a mindset that a lot of things are possible and there's nothing beyond our reach. Now, taking that vision and breaking it down into executable chunks is something that we'll cover when we talk about execution, right? But it's not just to have a dream, but at least you've got to first of all think it for it to be able to happen. If you can't think beyond what you see around you, you will not be able to lead other people. So your leadership will be limited to the things that you see, the challenges that you face, and the environment you find around us. So I always have a challenge when I find, and I challenge, and I'm going to be provocative here. Some people will say, okay, maybe it's because it's worked for you, and not every other person has the opportunities. I look at Nigeria and I ask the question, what do you see? Do you see a country of possibilities, or do you see a country that is a failed state because nothing works, right? And it's what you see that actually drives what you do. So people actually raise money, contribute money, right, to be ferried across the desert to go to Europe because they believe that's a promised land. Same amount of money I have seen people, I've seen somebody start a business with a turnover, right? One of the distributors I had in Procter & Gamble with a turnover of 200,000 Naira a month, now grow to be a 7 billion business per annum, right? In about 10, 15 years. I've also seen a farm. I went to Burning Kebbi recently, and I saw a guy who had a farm that has 35,000 birds, right? He started with 20 birds 15 years ago. That farm is fully automated, has air conditioning and everything, and this guy started from his backyard, right? 15 years ago with 20 birds. The question is, what do you see, right? So it's your mindset and your vision that determines this. So if you don't have a big picture mindset, it's always going to be difficult for you to lead your people and therefore drive them. Now, creating a vision that stimulates and moves others requires you to transform your mind, because there's a very simple formula for success in life. You've got to change, for you to get results, you've got to change the thinking, because it's the thinking that determines the actions, it's the actions that determines the results that you get. So in the words of John Assaraf, change the belief and the thinking changes. Change the thinking and the action changes, change the action and the results changes. The challenge we have is that we most often want the results. We do not want to go through the process to understand what it takes to get to the results that we have. So for you to fix that, for you to develop your leadership, you've got to think of that. There's also the words of Stephen Maraboli, the victim mindset dilutes the human potential. By not accepting personal responsibility for our circumstances, we greatly reduce our power to change them. So where you find leaders that have an excuse for everything that is happening, which is why they cannot set a target that is big enough for them. So I've had questions when I've worked on certain projects with my team members to say, okay, oh, we want to build this brand. right? And they say, oh, we can grow, we're doing ₦1 billion now, and you know what? We want to move it to 1.1 billion. It looks like it. I said, why do we say 1.1 billion? I said, why not 10 billion? Why not 5 billion? And they go about, well, we're growing incrementally. Yeah, you know, 10% is a lot of growth. The market is growing at 3%. I said, no, you're looking at the market growing. Have you thought about the opportunity? So I simply ask a question, how many households are there in Nigeria? Oh, there are 20 million households. How many households today use the product that we're talking about? Okay, so let's start multiplying. What will it take us to move from 100,000 to 200,000 to 1 million households, and what it is the way you frame your mind and the way you look at that, or else it will be, okay, the environment is here, the environment constrains us, the environment doesn't allow us. So what's your definition of success for you, for your team, for your organization? How do you stimulate and open your mind? So do you read wide? Do you look at other people's success stories? Or do we look at their success stories with cynicism and say, oh, somebody must have helped him, somebody cracked his cap? You know, we're very cynical about people who have been successful because we think that, oh, this person cannot achieve it without one help or something. There must be one story. Other than, you know what, this guy probably applied himself, or this set of people applied themselves, and you know what, they've done this thing painstakingly, and over time, they have built something, right, that has become sustainable, and they built something that is now possible. Do you look for example of what is possible in your industry, in other industries? Because you can get stimulus, right? There are things that you can do and apply in your organization that are applied from other organizations. They don't have to be done exactly the same way. But if you don't open your minds, if you don't have an external focus, if you don't look at other countries, something that has happened elsewhere can happen here. The fact that it hasn't happened in Nigeria is probably because there are certain limiting factors. You've got to understand those limiting factors and therefore open your minds to say, okay, how do I understand as these things are shifting? Or are we the ones that can actually create the shift for these limiting factors to happen? And if we do that, then you start to find that, okay, you can start to paint a picture that is actually big. The other thing to think about, do you have the courage to free your mind to think about what is possible? We like accolades. Everybody likes to be seen as a success, right? You will not make a success as 100% of everything that you try. Because if you get everything that you try 100%, you have not pushed yourself well enough. So it's comfortable for us sometimes to be in a zone where, because we've been good at doing something, we never want to be seen as, okay, we failed, and therefore we never take risks. And so we actually hold ourselves, and we actually hold ourselves back from thinking about what is possible and what we can create. And by holding ourselves back, we are actually holding the teams that we lead. You know, I've had examples in previous times where in a role, we had a big challenge with one of our plants in the factory, we couldn't produce. And I went to tell my boss, I said, look, I think we can produce without this thing. I think I have an idea how we can do it. And he said, no, it's not possible, gave 1,001 reasons why it's not possible. And you know what? We didn't do it. And fortunately, he took 4 days leave. So I went to his boss and told his boss, I think we can do this, right? And his boss says, okay, why don't we give it a try? And we gave it a try, and guess what? That's how we started. We resolved that problem, and we continued to produce and do stuff. Again, where was it coming from? It's not necessarily something that I invented, you know. It's just listening to other people and saying, okay, we've tried something like this before. And you know what? You have nothing to lose. But if I was afraid that I was going to fail and therefore I could fail, if I fail, oh, it means that you're bad. You're not defined by your fears. You're not defined by one result, right? You've got to be able to separate yourself from just one result. So the more you stretch yourself, the more you open your minds, right? The more you can create an opportunity or an environment where you can actually start to lead your team from what is possible. I think one of the greatest challenges we have in leadership across most of our institutions and all levels is the fact that we do not try to create this big picture. When the American president, I think it was Kennedy, went to NASA and he met a cleaner, I think it's a famous story that you find in the internet, and he asked the cleaner, what's your job here? The cleaner didn't say, I am a cleaner, I clean toilets. The cleaner said, we are trying to put a man on the moon. Now, just a challenge that the president gave to NASA to say, look, I want us to be able to put somewhere, it was unthinkable, is what created all the things that led to developments that, you know what, it's not about space age, but everything to do with avionics and everything that you have as far as ballistic missiles and all those other things that have happened. Just one challenge to say, is this possible for us to do that? And guess what? Creating that, and think of the guys in that organization that created it in such a manner that a cleaner did not define his role as a cleaner, but he said, we're trying to put a man on the moon. That's what we do here. So how many of us in the roles that we do, we have responsibility for people, or in your family, you have responsibility for your family members, you're the leader of the family, you're this thing. How many of you have a clear picture of what you think is possible for your family, for your organization, for your team, not driven by the current circumstances, not driven by history, driven by what is possible because we've seen that happen. Creating that picture that is very clear is what then takes you to the second level where you can start talking about how do I enlist people, how do I engage them, and therefore how do I start to bring this to happen. But today is simply about envisioning, right? And not necessarily about going through all the other levels. So I will just summarize what I've tried to say. Simply, leadership is about delivering results in a manner that inspires trust. Trust is about competence and character, right? So how do you build your people and your team to be able to apply themselves, right? For you to do that, you've got to build a picture of what is possible. Now, this is not easy, especially when we think of the competence and character part. One of the biggest challenges for me as a business leader is finding people that are good, that have both competence and character. You've got to sell the picture of what is possible for your employee to understand that I do not need to take a bribe. I can build myself and I can create wealth, because if you build your capacity, you will actually be able to demand the kind of wages that you want. But you've got to be able to sell that. They've got to be able to see that. You've got to be able to paint it for them to accept that actually we can actually work, we can make things work, we can actually rise, and we can earn wealth without actually cutting corners or doing deals or doing background deals. So it's something that is critical if you want to build that kind of organization. For you to do that, you have to apply the 4 elements of leadership for it to be complete. And really, envisioning is simply about painting a picture of where you're going, why, and how does it look like. That picture has to be crystal clear for your team or the team of people for you to get. You know, you can give people salary increases, you can give people cars and perks and all of this, and all you find is that a new organization can come and actually throw more money at them, and you will lose your people. So in most instances, right, if the picture of where you're going is right, they can see the pathway towards that, and you have a balance of the other elements. I'm not saying those elements are not important. What you'll find is that you will own your people, right? And they will work for you beyond the fact that the work hours say 8 to 5. So this, in summary, is some of the principles that govern leadership, just focusing on envisioning and how you can get your people to buy into where you want to get them to go. But that starts from you actually opening your mind. You cannot give what you don't have. So if you don't have a broad mind that can see the future, how can you lead others to the promised land? Thank you for your attention. And if there are questions, I can take some of those questions and comments.
Wow. Great. I think it's sorry, I think it's a good time to put our questions together. So if you have questions in the house today, I think For the last 30 minutes, it's been a loaded gun, essentially for me. And I think if you have questions, there's a Q&A box in front of you. You can begin to quickly populate your questions so that we can begin to ask. I think I'm going to start, with the first question, so that while people are warming up to get their ideas together, I want to talk about a few things. So, sir, you mentioned that you asked something very critical, and I think is I think we can begin to draw strength from. You said, how do we stimulate our minds?
Yeah.
How do we stimulate our minds? And you mentioned two ways in which we can stimulate our minds. You said we can stimulate our minds with books. We can stimulate our minds by looking at what other companies around in the industries or other similar products are doing. And instead of being, cynical, we can actually learn from their experiences. Okay, so what I wanted to get is, can we get a few applications of that? So you mentioned a few examples of companies that have grown from, 200,000 to 7 billion in Nigeria. And basically by looking at what's possible in the environment, and people who have taken the same 200,000 naira to travel abroad and they didn't even get abroad. So how do we, is there a limit? Is there a limit to how we stimulate ourselves this way? Is there a boundary? Can I say, look, you're going too far, or you're being too optimistic, or you're being too positive? What's the limit to this stimulation, that doesn't become wishful thinking?
There's no limit to the stimulation, because I think the more stimulus you have and the more materials, it's not only about books. There are books, there are magazines, there are documentaries, there are things that talk about things that have been done. So they open your minds as to what is possible. And basically, I think is to jot around. If you start, it's like building a canvas. What is widely possible, and then you start to narrow down, because once it comes to actions, you have to become very, very focused in deciding what exactly is possible. So the thing, and I think sometimes the challenge for people is understanding, how do I manage? I have this big idea that I want to get to, and understanding that, okay, I want to take baby steps, and they cannot see the link between that big thing, right, and the small steps that you have. And the simplest way is to look at examples where you start you start selling something from a few outlets, and then before you know it, right, it gets to critical mass, and boom, right, everyone starts to buy. And then all of a sudden, what people see is that, oh, this thing is selling, right? And people forget, right, that these guys have been doing their work. Simple example is take Amazon, right? Amazon has been trying to drive logistics and everything. And actually, if you look at their business model in the last couple of years, they've not made any real profit in trying to drive logistics, but they've been building the infrastructure to do that. Boom comes COVID, and nobody can move. And so the only thing you can have is get things delivered to you. So guess what? Which is the company that benefits most from it, right? Amazon. Now, they didn't preview that COVID was going to happen. They were building a model to say, you know what, we've got to build a framework. We have a model to say, okay, this is what we will do. And as they went along, they've been trying to take cost out to make sure that this is the pathway for us to get to profit. And so they're able to do that and drive that. I give a simple example. Take, okay, these guys who sell ice cream on bicycles. And I remember in P&G, it was one of the things that got myself, and I think Agbo, an award for Middle East and Africa. I think the Lemon Kiosk drive. These guys were selling ice cream and yogurt to people using bicycles. And when we started selling Vicks Lemon Plus, and one day I just looked at one of the guys and I said, wait a minute, if these guys can do it, because we had sales rep with vans, and these things were expensive. Now, how do I expand my distribution? And I said, wait a minute, if I get a guy on a bicycle. So we got one guy on a bicycle, put him on a bicycle, put a few cartons on the bicycle, and just got him to be cycling around town selling from tabletop to tabletop. And all of a sudden, we started to see some growth, right? And then, when we started to see some growth, it became something that became a national initiative. And then at the point we had more than 100,000, more than 1,000 bicycle reps. And then motorbikes became cheap, because at that time, motorbikes were like 300,000. And then motorbikes, because these Chinese bikes were coming out, became 30,000 naira. And so instead of using a bicycle, you could actually put a motorbike, put a box, and therefore the challenges of replenishment. And that's how we moved from bicycle to motorbike reps, right? Just like that. And you know what? That's what expanded the growth of the brand. So we were not arrogant to say, oh, look, we're bigger than these guys, we're a multinational, these guys are a small company or whatever. It's just looking around to say, okay, this is what it is. But then you have to hone it back and bring it back to what is possible. So yes, the dream is here, and then you build your building blocks, and you will always find a gap. So what stimulates you is, okay, how do I bridge the gap? And every day, every week, every month, you are adding something to say, okay, you know what, this is what we're doing. So very simple, like, you know, like in the organization, I've asked the supply chain guys, okay, I want a task. I want you guys to find me 1 billion naira in cost saving. They don't have a clue how they're going to find it. Right? So how are you going to do it? So let's start breaking it down, okay? We've looked here, we can find 10 million. We've looked here, we can find 10 million. We've looked here, we can find 10 million. Yes, it's only 30 million, right? But it's 30 out of 1 billion. Now, but the gap is still there. So we will be tracking, because if we wait to say we don't have a clue, we will not do anything. If we're waiting to find the most ideal solution, we will not do anything, right? So let's start with what we have. Let's start, and we're keeping tracking and tracking and tracking. And at the same time, we're cracking our heads until we find a solution. So that's the way you can bridge your dream or what you think is possible and what the reality is and what the current situation is. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it helps. It helps. I'm going to allow a few questions to fly from around here. I have a few more myself that I will still ask. But let me just quickly get a few of these questions in. Somebody said, how do we identify people with like minds that can understand our business? Somebody's asking, how do I get people of like minds that understand what I want to do so that I'm, you know, bundling with right minds? And somebody said, what is the place of motivation in talent retention in times like this? Is there any
role? How do you find like minds? And there are a couple of things. So for those who own businesses, right, one of the first things I always tell people is that you've got to be able to write down what is the culture of your organization. Because when you say you're looking for like minds, you've got to define what is the like mind, right? So this is the organization that I run. This is the character or the DNA of the organization I want to run. So if I want a high performance organization, for example, what drives high performance? So you have to have clarity about the qualities they bring from a functional expertise, from a leadership expertise, to the environment, the way your office environment, to the culture that you have in your office. You can't have Ogasa, people carrying bag, carrying plate, and then you say you want a high performance organization, because you build a culture of sycophancy. So you've got to define that. So does your organization have clear statements of values, behaviors that govern the organization? So when recruiting, it is basically looking at that statement of values and behaviors that you try to look at. Can I see through the examples that the person is giving what he has done? So when I'm looking at people, I don't look at just your results. So I usually say, look, if anybody tells me all I care about is the results, I see an abdication of leadership. Because you can spill blood in trying to get results. So when people typically say, I don't care, they are asking you to do anything, and I don't want to know whether you've done anything illegal so long as you bring my results. No, I do care. I do care about the how, because it has to be sustainable. The results have to be replicated by the organization over and over and over. That's why when you look at certain organizations, especially the multinationals, it's easy for you to say, if I look at a Guinness person, I can tell you this is a person from Guinness. If I listen to a BAT person, I can tell you this is a BAT person. If I listen to somebody from Procter & Gamble, I can tell you this is a P&G or a Proctoid, as we used to call them, because there are certain qualities and behaviors. So when recruiting, that's what you look for. So if you haven't defined that for your organization, you won't have a clue what to look for. So that's the first step you've got to do. You've got to define that, and therefore you've got to then measure when you're looking at people, whether there's a culture and value fit to your organization. If you see that, you hire. I've been in organizations where we've had people who are fantastic. They've been fired after 6 months because they are not a culture fit to the organization. Now, you've got to be rigorous to say, this is how we behave here. This is who we are. and this is what we stand for. And this is how we're going to do things. I give a simple example. When I joined this role, somebody came to me and said, oh, look, boss, there's a payment we used to give some people to facilitate a particular thing for us. And I told them, sorry, it will not happen. And the guy said, oh, we can run the risk of losing the business. I said, I don't care. If we go to zero, we go to zero and we rebuild the business from zero. But guess what? We canceled that. And actually, we're actually growing that particular line of business by 30%, right? So basically, that excuse was a red herring. We've done some, and we found out that somebody, that payment we were supposed to be giving a third party was actually going to one of the internal people.
Wow.
So if you don't ask, right, people will create the atmosphere to make you feel that this thing cannot happen unless you do this. So I've had experiences when I was in P&G, when we had delays at the ports and things. I had to reach out to some friends I had who were senior in P&G, in customs. And you know what one of them told me? He said, look, when I called him and after pestering, he said, look, your things are at the ports. We have challenges with things moving out of the ports, but we know your company. We know you do not give bribe, and we also know that your documents are also correct. So just hang on, your things will come out, right? That was the testimony of a very senior customs officer when he was speaking to us. So it's about the choice that you make. You can take a shortcut because you want a shortcut results, or you can choose to say, you know what, this is the kind of organization that I want to build, and therefore the values and cultures that you write down is what you will use. We're doing the same exercise right now. You know, we're rewriting our values, right? We're trying to work out what it is, translate it to what it means for somebody who is managing himself, for somebody who is managing other people, for somebody who is managing a function. So it's very clear and transparent. There's no subjectivity. If I'm looking for courage, what does courage mean for a functional head? What does courage mean for somebody who is managing other people? If I'm looking for an entrepreneurial spirit, what does it mean? You know, it's those kind of things you've got to be clear about and define clearly for people to see.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very good. I hope you've gotten your answer, the person that asked for that. Someone is asking a question here and saying, is there any book you can recommend for us to read? And I'd like to pair that with, how do I grow from a limited mindset?
So I have one here, one of the best books I like from a leadership perspective, and this focus on the individual, is by Rob Goffey. It says, why should anyone be led by you? Right? I think it's, from a leadership perspective, I think it's a good book for any aspiring leader. I think you will find elements in Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits, right? Because some of those principles actually help develop and build your leadership, right? I think there's also another book, So Good They Can't Ignore You. Right, so I think from a leadership perspective, this is, I think these are books that I will recommend for you to start with at least. This, Why Should Anyone Be Led By You, was written by Rob Goffey and Gareth Jones. What does it take to be an authentic leader?
Okay, very good. Someone is asking, how can he begin to think big? How can he grow from a limited mindset?
I think a couple of things. One is that, like I said, is exposure of your exposure to things that you read that will stimulate you, a lot of things. The second thing is your cycle. Who are the people that you move with, right? A lot of us invest our money and time and data on sites and information that is very, very negative and pessimistic. So if I take the world today, if you speak to a lot of people, they'll tell you that the world is getting worse. And that's not true. The world is getting better, right? It's just that, okay, yes, sometimes we might go through tough times. If you think about things, if you think about infant mortality, if you think about death, if you think about access to education, if you think about jobs, lives, housing, everything, the world has gotten better over and over and over and over. However, if you read a lot of things that are being spread on the internet, is doomsday. They are bringing 5G to kill all of us. They are doing this to kill all of us. They are doing that to kill all of us. So who are the kind of people that you hang around with? Who are the people that you discuss with? What's your setting, right? Those people are the ones that will either limit your dreams. They will tell you you're a dreamer. It's not possible. It's like Joseph and his brothers, right? There was a deliberate reason why he had to be sold away, because each time he told them about what he saw, they say, who are you? You are number 12 in the family. You are a small boy. You have nothing, right? All around us. So you've got to be choosy about your cycle of friends or the cycle of people that you spend a lot of time with, because those people can condition your thinking based on their own experiences. There are people who are not able to distill their own experiences and therefore think that their experience is what translates for others. And it's one of the challenges for people who are leaders, especially those who are even successful, that you've done certain things, right, can also mislead you and think that that's the only way. So you've got to be open. There are instances, there are times when I have accepted to do things that I disagreed with. So when my team have brought up something and I said, you know what, I don't agree, but because of the push, the courage of the young individual to say, I want to try this, I look at it and I say, in the scheme of things, actually, you know what, this is 300,000, this is 500,000. It's not going to, we're not going to lose money. Two things can happen. You will either learn that, okay, you're right, and actually something can be better, and you will have educated me, or I will also confirm that, okay, what I thought was right, and therefore there's something else that we both have to learn. And you know what, there are instances where the guys have been right, right? And those ideas have turned out to be right. So if you allow only yes people around you, if you allow people who are negative around you, especially those who are leading, everybody wants to carry over, everybody wants to tell you, you are our leader, everything you said is okay. No one can query you, no one can question you. You don't allow your people to ask questions, why should we do this, right? What you're going to find is everybody will start to tell you what you want to hear. And what it means is that your options will become less and less and less. So you've got to be open to positive confrontations, right? That's debate of ideas. And not because you're trying to prove you're smart, not debates that is trying to prove that you're smart, debates that will open your mind. Okay, this guy is saying something, I've never thought about it from this perspective, right? So I think if you do those things, they will help you the more. As you open up yourselves to reading about a couple of things, you'll find more and more things link up. Sometimes I want to find something, I just do a search. When I started this job, I've never worked in the animal feed business, right? I went in on the side, I said, okay, I want to grow chickens. What can I do? 1,001 things came up. I saw a company's website, and when I saw their website and the kind of materials they have to even train farmers, I went to my marketing team and I said, wait a minute, guys, this is what we should be doing. We shouldn't be trying to reinvent everything from the wheel. So I said, you know what, I can take this thing, remove their company name, remove their logo, remove everything, just adapt and put our products and everything. And you know what, we have a solution that is world-class, because this is coming out of a company in Australia. But it's by going from one link to another, you know, opening this, and just looking for how can we do things better. So you've got to have a continuous improvement mindset. How can I be better today than I was yesterday? And tomorrow, how can I do something better? And how can I do that? So I think for me, those three things are critical. Your choice of friends or the people you hang around with that you discuss with, right? The kind of things that you read and listen to, because you have a lot of negativity telling you that the world is getting worse, why in reality, the facts and data show that, you know what, the world is getting better. And then just willingness for you to drive, to allow the people underneath you, especially when you lead, step your ego down. Humility is what helps drive people to grow, right? The fact that you believe that other people have something to offer. Yes, you are the boss. Yes, you have 20 years experience, but you know what? You don't know everything.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so good. I have a few other questions here. Somebody's asking here. Okay, if people didn't get the author of So Good to Ignore, I think you can Google it. Yeah, people can Google that one. Just Google it.
Yeah, you can Google it. Let me just get the name of the author. It's Cal Newport.
Cal Newport.
Yes, Calnewport.
Okay. Cal Newport. Someone is asking here. I'll just take a few relevant questions. Someone is asking how for thoughts on how they can build a culture of performance when there are pressures of insufficient money to pay their staff with. So while they want to build the right culture, the staff, they are impatient because they want to get quick money. And then the other person is saying he finds it difficult to create a vision to lead old people, no matter how much he tries. He feels, how do you stimulate elderly people to achieve a vision regardless of how shiny it is presented? How come I don't seem to inspire them? Yeah.
I think, first of all, two things. When it comes to staff, and this is where when you manage people, again, I'll use one of those small examples, right? One of the guys who was a distributor, he started as a wholesaler with us in P&G's business now is roughly about 7 billion, right? He started with one shop in Lokoja and expanded. And this is how many years later? I think I left P&G in 2002. Today we're in 2020. His warehouse manager, his sales operations manager is still working in the business, right? Because right from the onset, no matter how small it is, he created a picture of, okay, we're going to share profits as we grow. So the examples are clear that from that same business, this same lady has built a house, right? Because she has grown as the business has grown, right? So, and there were tangible small steps as he went along. He showed from example because how he managed the business, how they managed their resources, and there was transparency and openness. Some of us feel that if we let people know that this is what we're doing or how we're doing, right, that the people can shortchange us. A similar example here. We had town halls. I've started a series of town halls. And, I opened the books to the employees to understand, look, we're not making any money, or this is how we are, we're struggling, and this is what it is. The feedback from a lot of people, they were shocked and surprised that this is actually where we are. Because as far as they're concerned, people see the top line revenue and they think it's profit. And now that they realize it's what it is, some of them are now asking questions. Some of them are now coming with suggestions to say, why are we paying this person like this? Why are we doing this like this? So what would have been my job or the functional leader's job, these guys are now doing themselves, right? So I think it's chicken and egg, and you can wonder which comes forward. So if you're starting your organization, what I always advise people, be very clear how you're going to remunerate, what the promise is, and be very clear deliberate about the kind of people that you are with. Sometimes I think some of the challenges that I've seen in a number of organizations, we become too emotionally attached. You are managing somebody and the business is growing, and this person cannot grow beyond the level that actually requires. And we're having difficulty having to let go this person because it seems very emotional. We started as a small business. This person has grown, has been here, and now we're doing well. We say, okay, this person cannot be the sales director. Yes, he was the first person who started selling for us. But right now, what you require is something much bigger than that. You've got to find a way to settle the person and cut the person out and therefore have the right person to manage your organization. So transparency of information and how you do that always helps. If people know that. It's the same thing with your spouses, right? It's the same thing that happens. Some people say you can't tell your wife how much. Right from when we're cutting, I had my pay slip. I said, this is how much I earn. So that you don't put extra demand because you're making an assumption. Because people thought, oh, Procter & Gamble, American company, were paid in US dollars. Because we weren't enthusiastic. We went beyond the extra mile, right? And people assumed we were poorly paid. It's actually when the first offer came for me that we realized that, okay, actually with what we had, we could have earned a lot more, right? Because people were willing to pay for that, but we were not looking out. I didn't look out for my first job because the job was engaging, the environment was interesting, and therefore, we never really felt the need to actually go and look for. It was just, okay, people started knocking on the doors, and then all of a sudden, and at the same time, I think we had a change of leadership that started to shift the culture, And you know what? That was the thing that just unlocked everything for us. In terms of older people, I think you've got to understand people's learning styles and understand their limits, and therefore you can understand what you can use them for. I don't buy the idea that old people can't learn, right? There are some things they might not be able to learn. There's some things they may have difficulty, but you've got to assess whether the person has the capacity to that. Again, like I found in my organization, there are some people who are old, right, who are sleepy, but you know what, we've created a challenge for them, and these guys are taking up the challenge better than some of the younger people who are even having the same. So don't put a blanket, take each individual as the individual comes. The same thing for gender, whether women or women, take every person as an individual. Be careful of stereotypes. Yes, some of the stereotypes are based on people's experiences, but just leave room for the unknown factor X. What if this person is not one of those people? So you've got to create exception, but you've got to be clear what you're looking for. There's no need going through pain with employees. I've learned that the hard way. You know, at one point, okay, I was extreme, I could push, and therefore, if you were not performing, I would push to take. On the other hand, I tried to be very accommodative because I'm trying to build or develop, and you really will never know, right? Because till today, so long as you're pushing the boundaries, you will never know, right? I'm having to make judgment calls on people, and I've got to trust that I have the right mindset behind why I'm making the judgment call. I've got to trust that I might get it wrong sometimes because there's no measure to understand the fullness of the human mind. There's no way. So I will make assumptions. And the whole idea is not to be 100% right, is to be roughly right. If I'm waiting to be 100% sure, you're not going to make a call. However, even when we recruited people, I've always voiced that I'm giving this person a chance, because I have these concerns in this area, but these are the areas to look out for. In a lot of instances, those same areas have come back to show, right? And usually when that happens, the next time you're harder on the person because you say, okay, I want to make sure I don't make the same mistake. And so you always be oscillating. If you're too sure when it comes to humans, I think you're probably making a mistake, or you're making an assumption. Like one of my auditor friends will always say, in God we trust, everybody else we audit.
Trust God, audit everyone. That's a quotable quote. Okay, great. There's a point you made I wanted to ask further about. You said something about how your mind is framed.
Yeah.
That usually in management meetings, people are discussing how do we grow 10% from last year, 15% from last year. And of course, you are talking about breakthrough thinking, of thinking, what is the opportunity?
Yeah.
Now, so I want us to be able to bridge this into being practical. So
yeah.
I've been in business for 1 year. I know the opportunity is that we can have 20 million people that are engaging this product on a day-to-day basis. If I look at the opportunity, it's a huge opportunity. If I look at my reality, I'm just starting, and I have not moved yet. Now, of course, there's a vision internally that can say, you know what, let's go for what is possible, and then ask ourselves questions on how do we get there. But how do you marry the balance, the courage of your conviction, your vision, and the balancing it with the reality of the number of people you are currently working with, the capacity of people you are working with, and in where you currently are?
I think the best way for me, and this is, in my view, the approach to do that is very simple. Once you're clear about what the size of the opportunity is, you've now got to ask, why is this opportunity not translated? Right? Because it's in it's asking the why that you start to understand the limits. And then you can start to say, okay, now, what does it mean for us, right, to be able to do some of these things? What is within our control and what is outside of our control that we can look out for? So I'll give a simple example. I remember when ShopRite first came in the country, and we're having conversations about key accounts, and they had a plan that they were going to go to 50 stores in 5 years, and I said, you know what, it's not going to happen. And it was not because I was being persuasive. I said, look, so this is what it is. In every part of the world, right, retail has conglomerated. So bigger outlets have come on, chain stores and all of this, right? Large discounters, your Walmarts and co, right, is where people went. Why? Because it's convenient for them to shop. Those guys have economies of scale and they give you the right kind of discount. So your pricing is right. The environment is right. And I said, look, Nigeria is no different from any one of those. Well, okay, so the question is, why has it not happened? All right. So a couple of things. I said, okay, what are the handbrakes? The first thing is the cost of real estate. Because for you to be able to find these places, right, to get the land where you build these super centers and wherever, where they are accessible to a lot of people, right, the real estate in those places are very expensive. So if you just take the cost of buying the land or even renting a building in those places and look at how much profit you're going to make, your cost structure is going to be bigger, right? So if that changes, right, a lot of things. So what's the option of getting the best land or land in the place that is most ideal for people is to go to places that are far out of town. But then you have another constraint. How developed is your transport infrastructure? How easy is it for people to go? Now, take a look at the way all our open markets are structured across Nigeria. There's no town where you have a big open market where it's not maximum, maybe 2 drops from the farthest reaches of town. Because around where you have the open markets, you've had motor parks, bus parks, and whatever, and therefore it's almost like 1 drop. So that system makes it easy for people to access. And then what is the open market? The open market is a big superstore, is a big Walmart. The only difference is that each department is owned by a different person. Yes, the infrastructure is crap, but because the infrastructure is crap, the cost to serve is low. So if a Walmart comes in, it will not be able to charge as low as the open market. So they won't build critical mass. However, if cost of power goes down, transport infrastructure starts to improve, right? All of these things will start to unleash.
True.
Right? So what you find is that your ShopRites and your Park and Shop are visited by the elite who have already passed that threshold where the cost is the most important thing, but convenience is more important. But once you go beyond them, it's very difficult for you to find an outlet. So you can have 3 or 4 ShopRites in Lagos. How many will you be able to have in Ibadan to be sustainable, right? Those are the kind of things to look at. So yes, the opportunity exists. Why is the opportunity not being realized? You've got to now triangulate different pieces of data to say, this is what is holding, and that's what you're watching and saying, okay, this is what is within my control. So this is what we can plan for now. And then we have to watch out for these things, because as these things unfold, we actually will see the acceleration. So the way you build your structure is to build your structure to follow the growth, not build my structure because of the dream, and therefore you end up with this. However, the foundation for that structure, you've got to be conscious of the dream, because it has to be scalable whenever the time comes for you to do that.
Okay. In finding the structure, think about the dream. Okay. There are many questions, but I think we need to stop now. And I'll end with one final one, which has to do with the book in your hand. I like the title of the book. So I like Alex Goma's summary. Why should anybody be led by you? So there are many questions here. People are asking, how do I get people to join me in my business? How do I attract people? Basically, they're asking the same question. Why should anybody be led by you? Because I think that's the fundamental question. Fundamental question, is if you're going to join my business, if you're going to sign up into what I'm doing, if you're going to be a distributor, if you're going to be an employee, if anything you're going to be involved, anybody thinks to be involved with you, is because you are qualified to be somebody that they can follow. So I don't know, if you can summarize for us, why should anybody be led by you? Why will anybody follow someone? What are the things you will say?
I think at the heart of the book, I think what the book is trying to say is that leadership is about you being you, right? So there's no one model, right, to say this is a prototype. It's about you being you, but with skill. So there are certain things you have to bring to bear. And the first thing is about authenticity, right? Because I think people react to you if you are true and open and honest, okay? Understanding who you are and your strengths and understanding how you use your strengths. I think also understanding your weaknesses and owning up to them, and also showing vulnerability, because if you sometimes act as somebody who knows everything, right, it's very difficult for people to approach you. And for people have to see that, you know what, you're human, you feel emotions. Yes, sometimes you take tough decisions, but they have to understand that, okay, they can approach you. You can give them a listening ear. You can point them to what you have to do. You can nurture your relationship with your team. And the fact that you have a relationship with your team doesn't mean that you cannot be strict, right? You cannot hold them to high standards. So we always have people who are gravitating to two extremes. Either I'm very tough and hard on my people, or I'm very soft and emotional with my people. No, it's about how you focus on outcomes that you're trying to create with your people, how you realize that you can be you. You don't have to be the most flamboyant or the most clairvoyant or the most outspoken leader there. If you look at a variety of leaders across different businesses, you find differences in leadership styles, right? But the key thing is about authenticity. Do you know who you are, right? Do you understand who you are? Do you understand your strengths? Are you able to build on them? Do you understand your weaknesses? Are you willing to work with them? And are you open and vulnerable to say, you know what, this is who I am. You know what, I face these fears, right? I face these fears, but you know what, I'm willing to act despite my fears. And so, but what conventional wisdom tries to tell you is like there's a manual, you know, there's a DNA blueprint of one leader, right? So you just go and look for that one leader, and we're all trying to force fit ourselves into that leader. So I find people who are finding it tough, right? Who are finding it hard to hold a tough conversation with people, trying to force themselves to become that rah kind of leader, not knowing that that's not you, right? Yes, it's okay to be compassionate. Now, how do you bring being compassionate to holding people to account? That's where the skill comes in. So how can I be compassionate and hold people to account, right? It's okay to be tough, right? It's okay to demand the strongest from your people, but okay, how can I bring empathy? How can I learn to be more emotional, right, in that? So I don't stop being tough, but how can I do it from a mindset of people understand that I care about them? And really what I'm trying to do is I want us to get the best results out of it. And also to recognize that, look, you know what, when I shout at you, when I do this, please remind me, because this is something that I'm working on. And I can always tell you, oh, sorry, I am sorry. I have done. Look, I had an example of one of my former leaders who delegated responsibility to me. She had taken some decisions before she did. And you know what, I came and changed those decisions. Right? So when she came back from leave, the first thing she said was that, oh, why did you, and while she was talking, the first thing she did was, oh, I'm sorry. I delegated, you were in charge, and you made those decisions. So I'm sorry for trying to question your decisions. I just need to understand why you made those decisions. That's the only conversation. So you see, for that kind of leader, right, you will give everything. Like I told people when I was leaving that company, if she had remained in that company, I probably would not have resigned, because it would have been difficult for me, given the latitude that I had to grow, to take decisions, to go and tell her that I was going to resign. The day she was being sent off, I made a speech, and I think I made a statement, and somebody said, because 3 months later I resigned, and the person said, you passed a message to us and we didn't get it. Because I said, by your going, you have given some of us the freedom to explore. Because before then, it would have been difficult, no matter how fantastic the offer was, for me to go and say, you know what, I have this offer and I want to leave. So that's the kind of leadership you want to build, where, you know what, it's authentic, it's real. It's not about you being the expert, right? You can rely on people. I used to have bosses that would come to me and say, Alex, you're stronger than me in this area. You know what, I'm preparing a presentation. Can you help me fine tune this. So my boss will send his presentation to me to help him refine. I will correct it. I will do this and I'll send it back to him. And that's what he's going to present. He never said, oh, I am the boss. I knew I am the expert. He simply relied on that. So why should I not do the same to my own people as well?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Alex Goma. Thank you very, very much. I'm sure we've learned a lot today. I'm sure you can see questions pouring in. Beautiful enough, we're going to be having him again next week, Monday, as we take the journey forward in Engage and Enlist. So if there's anything that you have missed out today, come on time, drop your questions down. We'll go over them 1, 2, 3, 4. At least the first 4 questions will get asked, so you can bring your questions with you. Thank you very much for the time, sir. Thank you for sharing on leadership with us. I think leadership is very important. I think if a lot more of us are leaders, Nigeria will be a different country. The companies will be better. Our families will be better. Will be better. And for lack of vision, people perish. If we have clarity, we will not perish. I like a version that says, for lack of vision, people cast off restraint, meaning people are they are second guessing themselves. They're a bit restricted in the things that they want to do. Thank you very much. I think it's awesome.
Thank you very much, everyone, and it's my pleasure to share. And looking forward to seeing you guys on Monday again.
Okay, excellent.
Have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay. So for all that came in tonight, there will be a quiz. The quiz will be set by tomorrow. So please watch out on the Google Classroom for the quiz. We're going to be curating those quizzes and curating all of those things so that we'll get a result and we'll be able to have the best people who participated, who listened, and who took all the exercise.